Have you put your ancestors on the map yet? No? Well, what are you waiting for? Historic maps are crucial to your genealogy research, and in this video, I'm going to show you how to find them for free. Because, after all, I'm a frugal genealogy researcher. Hey there, if we haven't met before, I'm Lisa with Are You My Cousin, and this YouTube channel is designed to help you find your ancestors, grow your family tree, but not be overwhelmed in the process. So if that sounds like your cup of tea, you're in the right place. Now, I've always been a fan of maps, even as a little girl. When we would plan vacations, I would get one of those triptych books. Do you remember those little triptych books from AAA when you planned your vacation? I would have my very own in the backseat of the car, and I could check off, the towns and state lines and anything that we passed. I could check off on my little triptych and keep up with where we were in the progress of our trip. And when I had children of my own, I got them their own as well. Triptychs for our family vacations were so much fun. The kids loved them. And I can tell you, my kids are really good map readers now, even without that GPS on their phones. Now, as a genealogy researcher, I love using maps in my research. And I use a variety of maps. I use road maps, I use Google Maps, I use Google Earth, I use Street Views, I use topographical maps, I use insurance maps. If it's a map out there, I'm going to use it. I've even used maps drawn on the back of a napkin. Because after all, how else are you going to find that old family cemetery, right? But maps, they allow us to put our ancestor literally on the map, in a specific location, in a specific point of time. And knowing where an ancestor was on the map at a specific time allows us to track their migration patterns if they moved around. And that's important to our research as well. Because when we understand how our ancestors lived and where our ancestors lived, we can better able predict where their records might be. We can start to understand who might have been close to them. We might be able to understand better what issues, what family issues, what health issues, what economic issues, what political issues were important to them. And using that information, then we can start to rebuild their lives. And guys, when it comes to finding that brick wall ancestor, we have got to rebuild their lives year by year, day by day, month by month, and day by day if possible. We've got to understand them at that level. So the good news for us as genealogy researchers is that many of the maps that we need to use for our research are actually found online for free. So where do we find these free maps that we can use? Well, first place I'm going to probably go is Google Maps and Google Earth. I'll have them right there on our computers. We have them right there on our phone. It's easy to go to, and it's a great place to explore the area where an ancestor may have lived. I love the street view that they offer because I can literally walk the streets. I can see the terrain. I can see the topography. I can see what the area looks like, even if their house is not still there. It's a great resource. Now, a really fabulous collection I know many have used is the Dave Rumsey's Historical Map Collection. There are over 112,000 images of maps in this collection. So it's a must-see for genealogy researchers, right? Now, it does include maps literally from all over the world. So not just for US researchers, but these are maps that would be all over the world. And I think you will find them quite helpful and useful in your research. There are street maps, there are aerial maps, there are even climate maps. And if your ancestor was a rural farmer, you probably want to check out those climate maps. Now, the Library of Congress also has an excellent collection of maps from around the world, including those Sanborn maps that we often use. But we'll talk about them in just a minute. The Library of Congress, their map collection has things such as historic maps of cities. So you might find a historic map of San Francisco if your ancestor was out there. You can also find military maps that could be very useful in your research. The maps there are quite easy to look for. You can literally, in the search bar, just type in the type of map that you might be looking for and put in the location on the search bar for the Library of Congress, and it will give you the results, and you can sort them from there. The University of Texas at Austin houses the Perry Castaneda Library Map Collection. It's a fabulous map collection. They have over 250,000 maps in this particular collection, but only about 20% of them have been digitized at this point. This site includes the indices to maps at other universities around the world as well. So that's an important thing to do. Now, one special note here is they no longer actually update this particular site as of 2021, but I checked it this week and it was still active. So you can still see what's on there digitized, but they are not adding to it. But there's still a lot there for us to use and check out as well. Now, the University of Alabama houses the Alabama Maps collection. Now, this collection at the University of Alabama contains both U.S. maps and world maps, and they are divided into 4 categories: the Contemporary Map Index, Historical Map Archive, Interactive Maps, and Aerial Photography. And once again, don't overlook those climate maps when it comes to researching your farming ancestors. Remember, the weather was important to your ancestor who was a farmer, so that weather map is important to you too. Now, next up are the Sanborn maps, and I think many of us are familiar with those. These were fire insurance maps, and they're those big, beautiful colored maps that we see. Now, these are, I did mention earlier, they are found at the Library of Congress, which we talked about earlier, but these are such an important collection and one that we use oftentimes that I felt like I wanted to give them their own little section here. I don't know if you guys can notice, but it's actually thundering right now, and I just noticed, so you might be able to hear that on here. So if you hear that, that's what's going on. If you see the lights flickering, I think we might have a storm. Anywho, these detailed fire insurance maps give you a lot of detail about an ancestor's home, about the structure itself, about the neighborhood that they lived in. You can see things such as the type of material that home was made out of. Was it made out of brick? Was it made out of wood? Was it a single house or a single family home? Or was it an apartment type or tenement type building with multiple families living in it? These are all parts of your ancestor story and can be very helpful as you learn more about your ancestors. If you love using maps in your genealogy research, be sure and hit that like button because I know that I am not the only one. Next up is the Atlas of Historical County Boundaries. Now, we all know that boundaries change. This is a large project that is detailing many of those changes. So if your ancestor lived close to a border, particularly close to one of those county borders in particular, you might want to check this out to make sure and see what types of boundary changes and where your ancestor may have been living at any particular point in time. They may be living in 2 different counties, but never have moved. We've all seen that happen. So check out this map collection to give you a better perspective on what those county line changes may have been. Now, have you ever thought to use a city directory for maps? Yes, city directories have maps in them. And I think we often overlook that in using city directories because we're so focused on finding the individual's name in that directory, right? But look in the front, look in the back to see what some of those maps are and get a better perspective of how a town may have been laid out. Where did your ancestor live within that town? Can you find your ancestor's street within that map? And if you're looking for city directories, be sure and check out that Google Books that we mentioned in the previous video. Now, the Osher Map Library housed at the University of Maine is another good resource that you may not have thought to check out before. So you may see a theme here that many universities have map collections, not just for their areas, but for other parts of the U.S. as around the world. So be sure and check those out as you're going. Now, there's another website online that you might want to consider checking out. It's called Old Maps Online. Now, this is an index of over 400,000 maps in libraries and archives around the world. It's sort of a bit like an archive grid, but for maps. Now, next up is the National Library of Australia. For those of you with Australian roots, find a large and varied map collection that includes topographical maps, street maps, Australian state and territory maps, and a lot more. Now, if you're researching British ancestors, you want to check out the Vision of Britain Old Map Collection. It is focused mostly on Britain from 1801 all the way up to current times. Staying across the pond, you also want to check out the National Library of Scotland. Now, they have a large collection of historic maps that covers the United Kingdom, so don't overlook checking out their collection just because you don't have Scottish ancestors. Then there's the USGS topo maps or topographical maps. Now, I don't use topographical maps a ton in my genealogy research, though I am starting to pay more attention to them because a topographical map shows us the terrain, the land where our ancestors lived. And I think that's an important piece of the puzzle. If you're looking at farming ancestors, if you're looking at ancestors who are migrating, maybe you have farming ancestors who migrated. Well, oftentimes they'll go to land that is similar because perhaps they know how to grow tobacco in North Carolina. Well, where can they grow tobacco in Tennessee or in Kentucky? What would be the best land there? And so it kind of gives me an idea of the type of land that they are used to. And so it helps me to understand the land better when they are migrating in other places. Historic Mapworks has a large and varied collection of maps, such as property atlases, historic maps, nautical charts, if you have seafaring ancestors, and also aerial view maps. And of course, I happen to like this site because it also has city directories. So as you can see, there are a ton of places that we can look as genealogy researchers for old maps that we can use in our research. And I've just really kind of hit the tip of the iceberg for these guys. And so I want to encourage you to look for more, because check these out. But if there's something specific that you're not finding, let me show you how to search for historic maps around the web as well. Okay, so we are over here on my laptop, and I want to show you how I search for free historic maps or free online maps to use in my genealogy research. So typically I just come into Google and I am going to type in probably online free historical maps. And this is a very general search. So just starting off with a really general search, you can see we get old maps online. The Library of Congress has free maps online. We have a site, Make Use Of, that's telling us where we can find some. Google is giving us the Google Maps, the Dave Rumsey map collection that we mentioned earlier, a new way to find old maps with USGS there. So these are great places all to find. Family History Fanatics has a YouTube video, it looks like, on it. So yes, so we have a lot of places that we can look and share. Now, oftentimes, again, I want to be a little more specific. So maybe I want to look online free historic maps, but I want to look at, say, let's use Kentucky again. Kentucky. So maybe I'm researching my Kentucky research. So I can see and get a little bit more specific. We have the Kentucky.gov map. So that's a great one to know about. University of Kentucky has one, Map Geeks. So you can see by putting in free online historical maps, I want to find them that are available online, and then putting in a location. I could even take it, down to counties if you want to, cities and states, or cities as well. So this is another way to do it. So definitely you want to structure it in this particular way. So I hope you found that helpful and picked up some hints and strategies to find free historic maps to use in your genealogy research. Watch the video on your screen now. I've got another video. I picked out another video for you to watch on free genealogy resources. So happy ancestor hunting.